Hello and welcome to this Candidates Forum for Ward 5 Councilor at Large. The general municipal election will be held on Tuesday, November 7th. I'm Jen Adams, the news director for Newton News at NewTV. I will serve as the moderator today. This forum is co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Newton and NewTV. I will now read the League's vision statement on fair, respectful, and transparent elections in Newton. We envision a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. To honor this vision and to protect the strength of our local democratic process, the League of Women Voters of Newton urges all residents involved in Newton's electoral process, whether as a voter, supporter, organizer, or candidate, to encourage respect for candidates and voters in all that you say and do, maintain a high level of integrity and reliability in all campaign activities. Ensure that communications are relevant, truthful, and fact-based. Become educated on the issues that are important to Newton's residents. Be open to honest debate. Maintain civility as we focus on our shared interest in Newton's future. As we encourage everyone to participate in our democracy, we likewise encourage all to show one another courtesy and respect when speaking, listening, online, and otherwise engaging, especially where there may be a disagreement. And now, on to our forum. The League is responsible for communicating with candidates and organizing the format, questions, and moderators. NewTV's primary role is facilitating production and dissemination of the forums. Members of the League of Women Voters of Newton may become candidates for public office. While the League encourages their members to become politically active, they have specific procedures in place to ensure the integrity of the forums and fulfill their commitment to being a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. Please be assured that all efforts are made to create a wall between all of the candidates and League forum planning. This barrier specifically includes no access to the forum questions. If you have a concern about this, please do not hesitate to contact the League at info@lwvnewton.org. In Newton, there are 2 city councilors per ward elected at large, and 1 city councilor per ward elected by voters only in that ward. This forum is for the 2 at-large councilor seats in Ward 5, elected by all Newton voters. The City Council has the power to make, amend, or repeal city ordinances, approve the city budget, approve the mayor's expenditure of funds, approve land use issues, and confirm the mayor's appointments to Newton's boards and commissions. We will begin by meeting the 3 candidates for Ward 5 Councilor at Large in alphabetical order. Deborah Crossley has lived in Newton for 38 years and is currently an incumbent city councilor and residential architect. Andreae Downs has lived in Newton for 32 years and is an incumbent city councilor and on the advisory committee to the MWRA. Rena Getz has lived in Newton for 30 years and is a neurochemistry scientist. Let me explain the format for our forum. We will start with an opening statement from each candidate, limited to 1.5 minutes. Then we will pose questions that have been submitted prior to the forum in writing by members of the public. Questions will be addressed to all candidates and will apply to issues or qualifications for their particular office. We will use as many questions as time allows, sometimes combining similar questions, striving to cover a variety of topics. If you don't hear your particular question, it could be combined with other similar questions. Each candidate can respond to questions with a limit of 1.5 minutes. The moderator will decide if there is a need for a rebuttal. Final closing statements will be limited to 1 minute. Now, let's go to the opening statements, which will be 1.5 minutes in duration. We start with Deborah Crossley. 90 seconds to you, Deb.
Thank you so much, Jen, and thank you to the League of Women Voters. Hello, everyone. I have been your city councilor for 14 years. I've lived here for 38 years as an active and involved citizen in our city government through the League of Women Voters and many boards and commissions. From that activism, I learned what works well in the city and what had not been by that time. I ran to fix a few things, and these things still motivate my attention at City Hall. 2 things in particular: our city infrastructure, buildings, roads, sidewalks, parks and playgrounds, etc., were deteriorated. I thought we needed strategic plans to fix those things. And we have implemented those plans over the last dozen years or so. Second, we need to fix the rules that determine what may be developed in our community. These rules have been strangling us since 1987. Strangling us in that they don't allow our villages and our community to evolve and grow to meet the needs of our community today or our community in the future. I'm still eager and enthusiastic to do this work, and I hope you will give me your vote again this November 7th.
Thank you, Deb. Andrea, 90 seconds to you, please.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm actually the director of the Wastewater Advisory Committee to the MWRA, and as I like to joke, that means I know my... I am an environmentalist. I am very concerned about the climate, about building Newton's community, about safety and access, about transparency, and I do support fixing our infrastructure in order to make all of that happen, our parks, our playgrounds. My focus has been mostly on transportation as a way to take care of all of these things, making it possible for people to live car light or car free if they so choose, or if they can't drive for some reason. That also reduces our emissions. It builds community because we relate to each other better when we're in person. It builds better public spaces, and it reduces congestion. I am a big proponent of our parks, playgrounds, and trails. I have also been active with and was the director of the Transportation Advisory Group before I ran for City Council. And I have been laser focused on our police and fire services as chair of the Public Safety and Transportation Committee. I want to make sure they continue to be first class and continue to improve.
Thank you, Andrea. Rena, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you, Jen, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rena Luisa Getz Escudero de Geltman, or Rena Getz for short. I'm running because Newton is at a significant juncture. We have a choice this election to elect city councilors that will listen and will be led by the resident voices. I will be that councilor. I will be your delegate councilor. And I will be led by being transparent and accountable. My civic experience comes from my decade-long work as a community leader. I proudly serve as the current president of the Woburn Area Council, and in that role, I strive to educate my community on pending city legislation, and I believe a well-informed and engaged citizenry is foundational for local governance. I'm Latina, I was born in Spain, and I was fortunate to grow up in many different parts of the world. I'm a scientist, a neurochemist actually, by training, and I value data-driven, fact-based analysis to formulate policy decisions. I have the skill set, I have the lived experiences, and I have the knowledge base to serve on the City Council. I will listen to understand, and I will enact the collective voice of the community.
Thank you very much, Rena. All right, and now for our first question. Andrea, this goes to you. There are many city council positions where there are no opponents. What can the community and civic organizations do to encourage more people to run for elected office? And how did others help you decide to run?
What a great question. It's certainly something that we think about every election year and every off year as well. There are a number of civic groups that feel they are participating adequately through their current methods and modes, and therefore do not need a vote on City Council. I tend to disagree. I think it's very healthy to have a wide range of voices on City Council, and I regularly encourage people to step up and take the risk. And if you have a strong network, it's easier to do than if you don't. I'm fortunate to have a large number of organizations that I've been a member of or affiliated with. They helped me and are helping me in this campaign. But it was in part working with the League of Women Voters and understanding the process. and the issues, as well as being encouraged by a number of people to run that got me started.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. Rena, the question to you, I'll repeat it. There are many city council positions where there are no opponents. What can the community and civic organizations do to encourage more people to run for elected office? And how did others help you decide to run?
Good question. And I actually think this is an important one because I think it's the responsibility of city councilors and the city governance to engage the community in full-throated and robust engagement. I believe that, newsletters, some of the city councilors put out newsletters either monthly, and I think that's a responsibility of being a city councilor. I also think it's important for the city to survey annually the community, as they partially do at this point, but I think it needs to be much more robust. And I also believe that if in fact the mayor wanted to pull in community members, she would be posting forums. And maybe biannually, some sort of format, so that people would want to engage with the city. I actually believe that on the personal side, being the president of the Woburn Area Council, we engage with the community monthly, and we specifically have a question that is taking questions from the community in the opening, and so we are conduit of information both from the city and then to the city. And I think that area councils throughout the city would be a really integral part of increasing community engagement.
Thank you very much, Rena. Deb, the question to you. would you like me to repeat it?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Very important question. As a longtime member of the League of Women Voters, and my heart is still at home with the League, and I served as past president, I'm very, very concerned about the small turnout of people running for seats this year. No school committee races, and only 6 races for the city council. It's extremely concerning. So is extremely concerning the very low voter turnout that is normally the case in these off-cycle elections, but even for the mayoral election, and even for something as important as the override. We got a 30% voter turnout. We expect half or a little more than half of that, maybe 20-something percent this time around. I always have chosen to be involved in my community through my schools, through city governance, as just a good citizen, but involved in the work and participating in it. Because I believe that if you're not part of the solution or helping to craft solutions to the problems we face, you are part of the problem. Do I hold our government our local city government responsible for bringing people into the field? No, I don't. I think this is something that individuals have to make up their mind to do. I'm concerned that we don't have good competing newspapers or news sources in our city. We are beginning to rebuild that, but it is not robust enough. I think I'm out of time.
Yes, Andrea, I saw that you raised your hand first for a rebuttal. Rena, I saw you as well.
Yes, thank you. I do think it's important that we have local news sources. I think that's part of what we're looking at is just a lack of information. But I have to say, I see Newton residents out doing things for the community as volunteers all the time. And I think that after you've asked the question and asked the question, to continue to ask the question in whatever format actually is a tax on our community, our volunteers' time, and the people who bother to turn out.
Thank you, Andrea. Rena, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, just a few things. I think that when David Olson was the city clerk, the city council was issuing a newsletter, and I would like to see that come back into production and to issuance, because I do think it's important for the city council to be issuing a newsletter. And then the other piece of it is that we have now 2 blogs, which are filling the void in terms of not having newspapers. And I think that that's the beginnings, but it would be wonderful to have a local paper again.
Yes, Deb.
I have to add that we have a problem with attracting and keeping young families in our community. And when young families do come into our community, they have an enormous amount of work to do just to pay the rent, they've got kids in schools, they both have full-time jobs and so forth. And it's very, very difficult for them to participate in the community. it's an additional amount of time that most of them don't have. So I've seen this since I was a young mom myself. It's on steroids today as our housing prices are keeping more and more young families out of our community.
Great. We will move on to question number 2. Rena, we will start with you with this one. How important are campaign donations in a candidate's ability to run an effective campaign?
Okay. I actually believe that it's important that we do not spend too much time having to solicit and garner funds from the community. But it's, you know, in Newton, it's actually, we're fortunate. We actually have the ability to, oh goodness, run a campaign with, you know, going to the doors and speaking with people. And, you know, the cost is really in mailings. And so that I feel as if there is a certain amount of time that is required to garner the funds to run for city council, but it's not as cost prohibitive as it is for other offices. And I think of it as being, we're still in the realm of being able to gather those funds and to run versus other communities. So I value the fact that we're local and that the dollars are not too difficult to raise, but I also feel as if there needs to be full transparency and accountability in terms of reporting. And so I believe that that's also a big responsibility of running for city council.
Thank you very much, Rena. Deb, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, that's all right. I have it. Thank you. Campaign donations are helpful and necessary to putting out the mailings and the other small things like buying signs and getting them out there. But for the most part, I think our local campaigns run on volunteers. It's interesting, though, there have been some highly competitive races in recent years where an enormous amount of money has been raised. And what do I mean by that? I think in many campaigns you can do it on $10,000 to $12,000. The mailing takes up most of that. But some of our local ward races in recent years have raised $50,000, $70,000, and spent it. So I don't think that's actually a good thing for the community. I wish we could cap this in some way because it just to level the playing field and really focus on who people are, what they really bring to the table, as opposed to how much money they can spend and how many mailings they can put out.
Thank you, Deb. Andrea, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I can handle that. Thank you. So I'm in a special position because of my position with the Wastewater Advisory Committee. That makes me a special state employee, and I cannot raise funds for myself or for other candidates, which is a little bit like running with very heavy shoes. However, I have raised campaign donations, many of them, and I would say most of them, very small dollar amounts from people who are enthusiastic volunteers and want to see this happen. I agree with my colleagues. It's mostly the mailer. If you're spending a lot more beyond that, and I've run probably one of the lower dollar at-large races as a rule in most of my races, anything more than that is gravy. It's, you know, tchotchkes that you don't need to buy. So it is important to get that mailer out, otherwise you just can't hit every voter in every door.
All right, we will move on to the third question. Deb, I will start with you with this one. Okay. What committees do you and would you like to sit on and why?
Well, I've served on the Public Facilities Committee since I began on the council. I served as its chair or vice chair for 8 years. And I love that committee. I love digging deep into the weeds on infrastructure issues. It's a great and finite problem-solving bunch of tasks that are before that committee. And since 2010, we've done a lot of really great work to begin to repair and rebuild everything from our sewers and water systems to our roads, to our sidewalks, to our school buildings. I currently chair the Zoning and Planning Committee after 10 years of serving on the Land Use Committee, where I could see really exactly where the rules were broken and how they were impacting our decision-making process. And I love serving as chair of the Zoning and Planning Committee. It is the most complex and challenging puzzle I've ever encountered. It's fascinating, and we're working with really terrific people, terrific counselors who are collaborative in the effort to solve the big problem that's before us, which is how to change the rules in order to better balance the development and the moderate development we need to enable our city to evolve and grow to meet the needs of our community today and in the future.
Thank you very much, Deb. Andreae, the question to you: what committees do you and would you like to sit on, and why?
I currently am chair of the Public Safety and Transportation Committee. That is my passion, and I would like to remain on that committee. I am very interested in the other two committees, however, so should they go on a different night, I would be very interested in either. Programs and Services, which does oversee parks, among other things, or Public Facilities that oversees the rest of the infrastructure. I also sit on the Land Use Committee, and in part because of my now 4 years on land use, I think I'm more interested in returning to the Zoning and Planning Committee, although finance is also intriguing. But if I can advance safe transportation access for more people, shorten people's commute, give up some of the school trip because it's now safe for your kid to walk or bike on their own, I'll be very happy.
Thank you very much, Andreae. And Rena, the question to you: what committees do you and would you like to sit on, and why?
Well, I am going to say the Zoning and Planning Committee, and this is interesting because the three of us want to be on that committee, which is great. But I actually believe that this is the most critical and the most integral one for our community, because it's actually where the land use laws get voted on and then from there implemented. So I see this as being the most foundational. And it's important to have very vigorous debate within this committee, and I think that I would want very much to support and continue making that a critical piece of the committee. Now, with regard to the other committees, I think that the Public Facilities would be interesting just because it's the bones, and I like the idea of thinking about structure and the existing buildings and how we both consider the adaptive reuse of those buildings, and how we can make them stronger in the future, because I really believe that it's important to value the actual construct of the buildings, but I also believe that we can be very thought through in terms of making them more energy efficient. Now, with regard to the other committees, I like the idea of, just for me, it would be the Programs and Services, because I think of it as being interesting to think about just how we implement many of our programs.
Great, thank you very much, Rena. Andreae, you have a rebuttal.
Well, I just wanted to clarify on our public buildings and our public building program. I sit on the Countryside Building Committee, but I've kept an eye on how we're rebuilding our schools and other public buildings, and I have to say they are all electric and increasingly more efficient, and we are going net zero off-grid, and we're already on that path.
Rena,
of course, I would like
first.
to follow up with that, because I actually think that adaptive reuse very much considers whether or not the shell and whether or not the building itself is worthy of saving, because demolition is highly environmentally costly. And I actually believe that we need to think about this a little bit more. I don't think demolition is necessarily the first step.
Thank you, Rena. Deb, you have something to add?
I do. On that point, we do consider adaptive reuse of our city buildings when we are considering redevelopment of a school, say, or senior center. And it's considered extremely thoroughly. There's a very rigorous process that goes into that. I also want to say that there's difference between public and private, of course, and as Andreae said, we use the strictest standards of energy efficiency and durability in our municipal buildings, and we have since 2016. We are ahead of the codes.
Great. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to question number 4 with Andrea. This going to you first. How would you assess the level of transparency that exists in our city government, and how do you think that the city can improve upon this?
Transparency in city government, we are broadcast on NewTV, but you're right, we could be more transparent. I particularly am anxious for a redesign and rebooting of our city website so it's easier to find things, including our votes and particular parts of discussion. I try when I do my reports for the Friday packet to make them better reflect the discussion so that people have a better sense of what kinds of things we considered. I also put out a newsletter on the issues that I think are most important before us, where I stand on them when I've taken a stand, or what I'm considering in taking that stand. And I hold office hours, and I attend many community events and committee events for small volunteer committees around the city, and in order to be able to answer questions and be available to constituents. And I've knocked over 1,000 doors already this season.
Okay, Andrea. Rena, this is to you. How would you assess the level of transparency that exists in our city government, and how do you think that the city can improve upon this?
Well, thank you. I actually believe that this is a critical piece that we need to consider, and revamping the city website would be priority number 1 for me. Just today I went to the City of Somerville's website, and I was so impressed with how easy it was to toggle through what you wanted. It was very user-friendly, it was very color-oriented, and for very many different types of learners, this is really critical. Unfortunately, the city council process is a little bit complicated, and something that comes out of committee, you have to interpret that vote, and then you have to understand what the votes mean, and then on the floor of the city council, it also too can get complicated. But above that, there needs to be a priority and a responsibility to distill all of this information, get it into a usable format and up on the city website, so that then there is more likelihood that constituents and residents of our community would actually go to this website and take in this information and be able to comprehend it.
Thank you, Rena. Deb, to you, how would you assess the level of transparency that exists in our city government, and how do you think that the city can improve upon this?
Website is absolutely a place I would go to make improvements. It's a budgeting issue. There have been improvements made, but it is something we could do much better with. I'd love to see some critical journalism in our city. And again, that goes back to having independent news coverage. I know I'm looking at you, Ms. Adams, who are one person who does this, but I mean something that comes to our homes, to our inboxes at least, on a regular basis. I think this mayor has, puts out a newsletter to 36,000 people or so several times a week. Of course, it is coming from the mayor, but I think the intention is to inform on a wide range of issues. The Fig City News is doing a good job of covering what's going on in the city. But again, critical journalism that's really asking tough questions would be very helpful. I make it a point to stay in touch with a wide range of citizen groups, boards, and commissions as a city councilor, in depth on issues that are deep. And that's been really important to me in terms of helping to inform the work I am responsible for on the city council. And I learn a lot from them, and it's been important to our work because we have benefited tremendously from the large number of people who have been involved in the zoning project.
Thank you very much. Moving on to question number 5. Rena, this goes to you first. Do you, and how would you, support the appointment of a dedicated diversity, equity, and inclusion director?
I very much support the appointment of a DEI director. I think that it's a process, and I believe that what's important here is that we sort of identify within the city staffing and within the resident community what the priorities are. And as a Latina woman, I think that the outreach is a critical component of DEI work. And then I think that dovetailing or interacting with the Human Resources Department and educating the community on how critical it is for DEI education to be implemented citywide is critical. But I also believe that we've started a process, the mayor has, and there was an initiative the report, it was in the 2022 fiscal year. So I'm looking forward to reading that report and then seeing the implementation.
Thank you very much, Rena. Deb, to you, do you and how would you support the appointment of a dedicated diversity, equity, and inclusion director?
Well, I believe the recommendation has to come from the mayor, which it will, and I will approve that. That's really our role on the City Council. The scope of what the DEI director does in City Hall, though, doesn't address diversity, equity, and inclusion across our city. And I think that the work we have to do there runs deeper than simply talking about how much we want to be a welcoming and inclusive community. We have to get into the really hard decision making that goes to enabling economic diversity in our city, which comes all the way back to how we plan and the bunch of rules we use to determine what may be developed in our city, and particularly housing. That's what I'm focused on primarily, because until we get those rules fixed, we are not building enough housing and enough smaller housing, compact and close to village centers, to enable that economic diversity. We need more so that our inclusionary ordinance will provide actual limited affordable housing, and we need more so that we can, and smaller units, incentivizing smaller units so that we address the need for middle income housing, which we have lost.
Thank you, Deb. Andrea, do you and how would you support the appointment of a dedicated diversity, equity, and inclusion director?
So I support the goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would wait to read the report and hear from the mayor about whether we want to have that be in a department. I do know that currently our police and fire have a very strong focus on improving their own practice. The HR department is working with every department on including DEI in their work and making it an integral part of everything that the city does. Similarly, on the school side, I'm seeing that, and I'm seeing that through the people I work with closely in transportation and facilities at the school level. I think that it's going to be, like Deb said, it's going to be also a citywide private initiative that will need to be taken to include more people in our city. And I would put a particular focus, and have been putting a particular focus on access, particularly for people with disabilities, that the way we construct our events, the way we construct our roads, the way we put together our sidewalks, the way we put together our buildings needs to be welcoming, inclusive, and accessible for people of all abilities.
Thank you, Andrea. Rena, I saw that you raised your hand. Do you have something to add?
I'm just a little concerned with how we are as a city, specifically with the zoning and within the Zoning and Planning Committee, going to incentivize economic diversity within the city, because I haven't seen it yet, and I don't believe that supply is going to be the answer for this. So I look forward to initiatives within the Zoning and Planning Committee or within someone docketing an item that would actually bring about the fruition of incentivizing economic diversity in the community.
Deb,
Well, we do have
something
two things. One is we have an inclusionary zoning ordinance that does require deed-restricted affordable units to certain income, folks earning certain income levels. That follows with this Village Center Overlay District that's on the table now. We also have it on the docket for early next term to review to see if it's possible to expand it. Finally, if we incentivize more smaller units, the price comes down automatically. That's not what we consider affordable housing, but it meets that middle income market where people are living smaller necessarily.
Thank you, Deb. Andrea, you have something to add?
I just wanted to note that when we permitted our last very large project in Northland in our ward, one of the provisions that we added was a small business provision. So it's sort of inclusionary housing, but for business, which I fully support and which I think may be key to ensuring that we have economic diversity in the commercial sector.
Rena, you wanted to add something
The
else?
other piece of this, I look forward to the reworking or the revisit to the inclusionary zoning. The inclusionary zoning now is 50 to 80% of the AMI. Originally, when James Freeze had proposed the changes to the inclusionary zoning, it was higher. It was at approximately 120 AMI. So I do think that there needs to be a consideration of implementing stronger and maybe even reconsidering a portion for the the 110 where it exists now, but also to the higher AMI.
Yes, Deb.
Quickly, I don't know how many rebuttals we get, but that's not exactly correct. There was not something that went up to 120%, and it was not instead of the income range that we have currently, the 50 to 80% averaging 65, if that means anything to anybody who's listening. But the point is we do require deed-restricted affordable units. We've done it according to a study that tells us what level of housing will actually get built that can afford the economics of doing that, because you want deeper affordability, you need more subsidy.
Rena, you raised your hand
I'm just going to
first.
end by saying that indeed it was higher. The AMI originally was proposed at 120 or their approximate when it was originally proposed, and it was brought down. And I do think that this is a bigger question, and it's a bigger issue. And I think that the resolution was looking at the inclusionary zoning to fulfill the workforce housing, and then to look at other processes to fulfill the 50, the 30, the 50, and the 80% AMI.
Andrea, did you have something?
We
to add?
are getting into the minutiae of affordable housing.
Yeah.
AMI is area median income for those of you at home. We're working hard to find, and I worked on the original inclusionary zoning rejiggering in my first term. We are working to make more affordable housing available at lower levels, and part of that was forming an affordable housing trust to help with the financing.
I think this next question kind of
Dovetails.
Yes, basically. Deborah, we'll start with you. Small businesses are the heart of our economy, and they are struggling now more than ever. In what ways would you suggest that the city support these businesses and our village centers?
So first and foremost, if we do not change the rules to allow our village centers to grow, to allow those property owners, whether they own the business or they rent to the business, to grow a little bit, to add more than one more story, to add up to 3.5 stories or 4.5 stories where we have planned it, then we're not giving them the opportunity to survive in our village centers. We're losing lots of business. Lots of them have been shuttered. Lots have moved from place to place, gone out of business or not. We have empty storefronts. This has been the case since 1987 because we changed the rules to overly constrict what our property owners in our village centers are allowed to do. And so they haven't done anything under those rules. And you see, I've been here 38 years and watched the slow deterioration of our village centers, of many of them, if not all. The only village center that's thriving most beautifully today is Newtonville, because we added 208 units of housing. It brings feet on the street, customers to the stores. We also need to be mindful of what happens to the business who's renting from a landlord who wants to then, build up and take advantage of this opportunity. There are laws on the books for federally funded projects where you have to provide relocation assistance. We would have to put a program in place in our city outside of zoning to do that for our businesses.
Thank you, Deb. Andrea, the question to you. Small businesses are the heart of our economy, and they are struggling now more than ever. In what ways would you suggest that the city support these businesses and our village centers?
So I really worry about our mom and pop unique businesses in Newton. And I have to say it's very difficult anyway to run a small business, but then to run it under the constraints of inadequate storefront, inadequate storage, not enough people on the street. I see it getting harder rather than easier. One of the major complaints is parking, and that's because people don't live in the village center and have to get to them. So I support the village center goals because I want to see more people for those businesses so that we can give them a chance at survival. I also know that those who come before us through the special permit process to waive our requirements for parking have to put up a lot of money and wait a lot of time. And this is on top of other requirements. So I also support waiving, not just in the special permit process, save them the time, save them the cost of a lawyer and a planner, save them the money, and allow them to change uses, add a table or two without coming to us for permission.
Thank you, Andrea. Rena, the question to you. Small businesses are the heart of our economy, and they are struggling now more than ever. In what ways would you suggest that the city support these businesses and our village centers?
I thank you for the question, and I actually think that it's critical that we actually survey, listen, and support our small business owners throughout the city of Newton. We're so fortunate to have the village center construct. And I think that one real problem was that the city, as well as the leadership in the Zoning and Planning Committee and the Planning Department, did not reach out to the small business community. And I am very concerned how they will survive any village center overlay in the current construct. I think that it's important to consider hiring someone specifically within the city Department of Economic Development tasked with this responsibility of reaching out and engaging small business owners within Newton. And I also think that we need to look to other communities to see what they're implementing so that then their small businesses do not die, as I am concerned about that happening now with the Village Center overlay zoning proposal.
Deb, you have something to add?
I do, thank you. So first, I want to remind everyone of the very robust community engagement process we have had that began almost 3 years ago. And many of the business leaders in our community, small business or small property owners, were in fact engagement leaders in that process, and then came to us at the very end and said, we didn't reach out. It's not a simple answer, but we actually have done a lot of reaching out, and I'll leave it at that.
All right, Andrea, you raised your hand.
We actually do have a person hired to reach out to small businesses. I see him on the street all the time when I'm visiting them. His name's John Sisson. Of course, we could always use more staff, but in order to hire more staff, you either need to pass a tax override or grow.
Thank you, Andrea. Rena, you have something to add?
Okay, I'm listening to the small business owners, and I'm very concerned that they were not listened to. And I think that it's it's important to consider them stakeholders in this community and to have started with them. Just so that if you do not have any data or any sort of survey result from them, then go speak with them. Go to their doors and speak with them at the beginning of the process, not at the end of the process.
Thank you, Rena. Deb, you raised your hand again.
Like I said, that was done at the beginning of the process. Many, many people were part of it. The chamber was part of it. Small businesses are members of the chamber. Business leaders in the community from the small business sector were engagement coordinators. 2 petitions were given to us, one from citizens, one from property owners, for and against the Village Center Overlay District in a particular village The business owners signed both of them because they don't want to mess up with their customers, they don't want to mess up with the community, they don't want to mess up with their landlords. You have to go deeper.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question, which kind of continues on our village centers, and specifically this one, affordable housing. So Andrea, we'll start with you. What do you think is the most important strategy that Newton can pursue to make the city affordable to live in?
Wow. It's, so go right to the heart of the matter here. This is exactly what we're talking about. When we bought our house, let me just say, we thought 6 years later it was great that our value had almost doubled, and 10 years later that it almost tripled. According to our median house price, we're aiming at getting 10 times what we paid if we were to sell this year or next year. Who can afford that? So I know a number of people don't believe in the economic rules of supply and demand. That isn't what the surveys, the data, the studies, all the urban planners who are out there looking at this in a scientific way, that's not what they're telling us. Supply and demand are real. Newton is one city, inside of 128, everything has gotten unaffordable. We may not see it here in Newton, or we may not be aware of it here in Newton, but people are doubling and tripling up. And we've got to give them homes. It's not fair. People should have a place to live.
Thank you, Andrea. Rena, the question to you. What do you think is the most important strategy that Newton can pursue to make the city affordable to live in?
Okay, this is a very complicated question, and I think of it as untangling the pieces of it. Land cost is extremely high here in Newton, and so you will see, like in the Austin Street project, where the land cost was eliminated. It's a rental of the land. The land was originally the city-owned property. And yet the rents are extremely high. No one can afford the 2-bedroom rents at the Austin Street or at Trio. So I think that unfortunately we're going to have to be creative about solutions here. We're going to have to robustly fund the housing trust so that then they're competitive with for-profit developers in order to purchase land and properties, and then fund these properties at higher percentages of 50 to 100% affordable units. I don't believe that the market is actually the real estate market responds to the supply and demand or trickle down housing theory, because you see it everywhere. You see it in New York, you see it in San Francisco. More density does not equate to affordability, and it will not happen here in Newton. So I hope that this newly formed housing trust does have, and we work creatively to fund the housing trust, because I think it's possibly the only mechanism within our city to create more affordable, and that's with a big A, housing.
Thank you very much, Rena. And Deb, to you, what do you think is the most important strategy that Newton can pursue to make the city affordable to live in?
Well, to answer your actual question, we need more housing. That's the one strategy, but of course that is built on many strategies. Others are correct. Yes, we need the land trust to be funded. We need them to be able to jump in and help us to create deeper affordability in projects. But we also need to relax our rules, as the Village Center Overlay District is trying to do, simply to enable the housing we need. I studied basic economics in college, enough to understand, and it's widely accepted, supply and demand economic theory works. When you don't have enough of something, the price goes up. We're a long way from being able to satisfy the demand because we've come so many decades beyond where we should have started that process, and we have to catch up. But we simply do not have enough housing of the right types. That is why we are losing young families in our community. That is why our school enrollment is steadily dropping. The cohort of people in our demographic are aging. We're older. There's a much larger older population and a much smaller group of young families of childbearing age. There are many strategies we need to employ, and I really want to keep working on that.
Thank you, Deb. Rena, you raised your hand?
Yeah, I actually would point out the RKG study that was done in 2016, that we as a city cannot build our way into affordability. So I think that we need to pay attention to that, and we can appreciate the numbers of residents that are already cost burdened in terms of their housing cost. So I do not believe in the supply side fulfilling the housing market need.
Thank you, Rena. Andrea, you raised your hand.
Yes, there are studies showing that allowing more than one unit per lot on an already expensive piece of land does cut the cost. It does help. It is, and in areas where they have allowed a little more housing, rents have moderated, if not gone down. And that's the key, and it's worked in other places. There's no reason it wouldn't work within the 128 belt.
Deb, I know you raised your hand.
Yeah, and again, it depends on what you mean by affordability. Affordable to whom? We're talking about middle market housing here. That's what's going to be impacted mostly by additional supply. The rental market is the most sensitive to price fluctuations. But at a recent forum at the Chamber of Commerce, it was made very clear, statewide, we need between 250,000 and 400,000 more rental units before that price starts fluctuating. Our state wants to build 200,000 more units of housing just to meet a reasonable demand to prevent the exodus of young families from our state.
We have time for one more. Rena, you raised your
Okay,
hand.
the only other piece I would add is that we've already implemented the detached as well as the internal accessory dwelling unit within our ordinance. And so people need to understand and appreciate that we can already do this. And this is actually a really good mechanism for adding more housing units on a lot. So it's a responsibility of us to let people know about this. And I look forward to, implementing more, speaking on this in terms of the community getting a higher awareness of this option.
Great. We will now go to closing statements. Each candidate has 1 minute, and we will start in reverse order. So, Rena, you get to go first. 1 minute, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Why am I running to be a city councilor? I consider it a responsibility, and I also grew up in a family that appreciates and believes in public service. We are fortunate within our city to have a choice as to who we elect as our representatives in municipal governance. And it's healthy for our community to be holding a forum like this and holding open debate. I actually believe that it's important to consider that we are currently facing very critical issues within our city. So it's important to consider heavily who you vote for in this election. Please visit my website at renagetz.org, and please know that all Newtonians can vote in this race. I would be honored to gain your support and your vote on November 7th. Juntos, si podemos, together we can.
Thank you very much, Rena. Andrea, you have 1 minute.
I have 1 minute. All right. I am also hoping for your vote for re-election. I'm a strong supporter of schools, of our city services, and of fixing our roads and sidewalks. I work for equity. I work for us to come together as a community. You can vote for me and one other candidate. I have my preferences, but please do so by November 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And Deb, you also have a minute.
Thank you. I'm Deb Crossley. I care deeply, and I think my example precedes me, of the condition and the quality of our community and its future. City councilor's job is a series of problem-solving exercises, and you need to know how to not only listen and do your homework, but to collaborate. You have to be able to work with your colleagues. You need to be able to hear from people and incorporate their ideas and their expertise into building solutions and then building consensus on those solutions. And then you need to act. And we have so much more work to do. I think the record of the last 14 years is strong in terms of what we have done to improve and bring our city to a better place, working together. I want to see us open the doors a little bit more to Newton to become a welcoming and inclusive community for everyone. Please vote for me on November 7th.
Thank you very much. And thank you. I would like to thank all of our participating candidates. I also want to thank NewTV and the League of Women Voters of Newton for providing this opportunity for candidates to make themselves known. And thank you to the audience for all the questions that you sent. Let me remind the audience that these candidates are running for Ward 5 City Councilor at Large. All Newton voters may vote for 2 of these 3 candidates. The polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on November 7th. If you will not be able to get to the polls on November 7th, you can vote absentee or early by mail or in person. For further information, call the Newton Elections Commission at 617-796-1350. If you don't know where your polling location is, you can call the Newton Election Commission or visit the city's website at newtonma.gov. On the Election Department page, you can verify your polling location. Be sure to check the Newton League's website at lwvnewton.org for more information online in their Voter's Guide. Today's forum is a co-production of NewTV and the League of Women Voters of Newton. Any use or reuse of this program requires the approval of NewTV and the League and must be shown in its entirety without any editing, only after the program initially airs on NewTV. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that promotes informed and active participation in government. The League does not support or oppose specific candidates or political parties. It does, however, take positions and advocate for issues that it has studied. Membership in the League is open to all people. For more information, contact or visit lwvnewton.org. NewTV is Newton's award-winning state-of-the-art media center, specializing in television production, training, and building community partnerships. It is Newton's primary source of locally relevant programming. Membership in NewTV is open to all Newton residents. For more information, call 617-965-7200 or visit our website at newtv.org. I'm Jen Adams for the League of Women Voters and NewTV, and I thank you for watching. Participate in our elections, and remember, democracy is not a spectator sport.